Sports shape lives, build communities, and drive billion-dollar industries. Yet their true impact often goes unnoticed.
From personal growth and well being to career potential, it's time to rethink what sports can do. This is the Why Not Sports podcast. Welcome to the Why Not Sports podcast, a podcast where we dive into the business and community side of sports. Today, we are welcomed by Christy Keswick.
Christy Keswick is the co-founder and president of Good Sports, a national nonprofit transforming the landscape of youth sports access since 2003. A proud Georgetown alum, Christy began her career in management consulting, where she honed the problem-solving mindset that now drives Good Sports' impactful work. Under her leadership, Good Sports has distributed more than $120 million in new equipment, apparel, and footwear to under-resourced communities across the country, ensuring every kid, no matter their background, has a chance to play. Fueled by the belief that sports build confidence and connection, Christy oversees the organization's long-term strategy, business development, and marketing.
Christy Keswick, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Christy, and then our first question, as always, is what's your sports story?
I grew up playing sports. It was a really big part of my childhood. Every weekend, every day after school, there was an opportunity for me to engage with my friends, coaches, and play lots of different sports. And so I played soccer, I played field hockey, I played basketball, I played softball, and really was a big part of my life growing up.
Absolutely. And did you think that you would end up working in this intersection of kind of the community side of sports long term? Or kind of what were your passions growing up, like your career, like thoughts?
Yeah, I always knew that I wanted to do something in the business world. And I think that really kind of fueled where I wanted to go to school, what I wanted to major in, and sort of my work after school. Sports was more, something I loved to do on the side as I got older. And so something, was always a fan of sports. And so I wouldn't say I knew I wanted to go into sports, but it definitely was something that always was a big part of my life.
Absolutely. And what inspired you then to co-found Good Sports back in 2003, right? And what was the early vision for Good Sports? And actually, if you want to go into kind of give a little overview from what Good Sports is from your point of view.
Sure. Good Sports is a national nonprofit, and our focus is very much to break down barriers to access to sport. What we found is that youth sports has become a very haves versus have-nots ecosystem. And so we want to make sure that kids that don't necessarily have all the resources are still getting access to sport and all the long-term benefits that come along with it. And I can certainly dive in deeper into our business model and how we do it and why we do it. But that is sort of a high level. And in terms of its, our founding, I started my career in management consulting, had an opportunity, actually, my very first job out of college, my very first day, met Melissa Harper. She and I shared an office and became fast friends, and also just very much from a business perspective, had a very similar mindset and approach to the business world. And so she and I both very early on and probably very naively came up with this idea that we wanted to start a company together at some point. And while that didn't happen immediately, it did happen several years later after she and I had gotten some experience in consulting. And really for us, I think it was two things: really loving the business side of things, loving the problem side of things, love the idea of building something, but also wanting to do something that felt meaningful to us. And that's really where both sports and giving back came into the equation. It really was the very initial idea behind Good Sports was, how do we take equipment that's available and get it into the hands of kids that need it? And that was the very sort of like first vision of it.
Sure. And kind of, for nonprofits particularly, it's hard to stay afloat, particularly during those early years. So, Christy, what were some like early wins for you guys, right? Like, what were maybe some like early success stories that you guys were like, okay, like we can actually, keep this going and make like the impact that we want to make?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think a lot of people think that, there's a lot of overnight success when you're building a business, and the reality is like it's really hard. And you really have to kind of stack up some small wins to feel like that you're moving forward. I think one of the early wins is we had several, and we still have several sporting goods manufacturers that were based in the Massachusetts area. When we started Good Sports, it wasn't national. It was very much a local Boston based organization. And we had an opportunity. We got an introduction to somebody out at Spalding, which was a couple out in the western parts of Massachusetts. And Melissa and I, went out there and had a PowerPoint in hand and nothing really else to show for it at the time. And, basically talked to their director of marketing into giving us a chance. He said, all right, I'll give you 500 basketballs, see what you can do with them. And a week later, we headed out there with a U-Haul and picked them up and put them in our cars and our apartments and, tried to figure out where to store them in the meantime until we could find an organization that could, use them. And so I think knowing somebody like that would believe in us. We were still in our 20s at the time and really didn't have a lot of track record to show for the organization. But you start to gain little bits of confidence. And then when you get an opportunity to give out those basketballs to organizations and you realize that how valuable they are and how much they're needed, it kind of keeps you going. So it's stories like that were the little building blocks in the beginning that really kept us going.
So kind of building upon that, with that early building block in that story, how has Good Sports evolved over the last 20 years?
Significantly. I think we are now one of the largest sports nonprofits in the country. We have donated over $120 million worth of equipment to over 10 million kids. We took our model and we expanded it and grew it nationally because we knew that the issues that we were seeing here locally were also very relevant across the country. We have brought on significant national partners as it relates to our partnerships on the equipment side, but also on the financial side of the business. We now don't have to worry about where to put those basketballs. We have a 40,000 square foot warehouse, got access to billions of dollars worth of equipment, and our partners know that they can call us and we'll be able to take in that level of equipment to make sure that it's being used properly and that our model is really sound and we can identify programs that can need it. So it doesn't look, other than our mission being the same and very much feeling like the philosophy of the organization isn't the same as it always was, the organization looks significantly different today.
Totally. And kind of based on you guys' mission, right? So today, what are some of the biggest barriers that you guys see for youth sports participation right now? And has that evolved over the years?
Yeah, it has evolved. When I was playing sports, it was very much very rec oriented, and almost anybody could sign up for a small fee and be part of local rec programming in their towns and neighborhoods. Sports has become a for-profit business in a lot of ways, and the introduction of club teams and travel teams has really taken over youth sports. And for the kids that we serve, that could be an additional barrier to play because the costs have become so high, and the rec programs we've lost progress on those, given a lot of kids have transferred over to these more elite and expensive programs. So we're losing the low cost option for many programs. And even those programs for some families are really even hard. So it's evolved quite a bit. And I've seen, even since we started Good Sports, that has become incredibly apparent. So the cost factor for sports has changed significantly, and it's leaving out a lot of kids that really deserve the benefits of playing sport. And unfortunately, when you have a for-profit business that's making a lot of money doing that, it's hard to put that genie back in a bottle. So there are a lot of challenges as it relates to that. Our focus at Good Sports is really making sure that we're supporting the programming that is out there and we're providing the resources so that they can be around for the next generation of kids to play. But it's a complex problem and, not something Good Sports can do alone. It's something that, we certainly need a lot of partners and people thinking about and talking about. We, in terms of the cost of sports, we recently did a study with Harris Poll, and we surveyed a certain number of parents, and 95% of those parents said that they thought that sports is really valuable to their kids, but 75% of them said that they had thought about taking their kids out of sports due to the cost. And so I think that is just an eye opener in terms of like what it looks like out there right now and the challenges that we're seeing in the youth sports sector.
So in tackling these immense challenges, Good Sports has worked with some major organizations, and you talked about the importance of these partnerships with organizations such as Fox Sports. How do these partnerships come about?
A lot of work. I think we know we can't do this alone. And so Good Sports is really focused on trying to identify partners that also care about some of these issues. And sports companies care about them because they don't want just a small number of kids playing sports, because fewer kids that play sports, the less likely they are to watch sports and, feel engaged with sport. And so sports companies, whether they're media companies or they're hydration companies or they're equipment companies, they all care because it's important to their business. And also, I think fundamentally care just because most of those people have played sports and realize the benefits of them, and also probably have children that play sports and see the benefits that their children are getting from them. So we identify we identify companies that really care about some of these issues, and we work with them to create mutually beneficial partnerships that will benefit the community, but also hopefully benefit the companies as well. And that's sort of how we approach our corporate partners, and why we've been able to bring on so many of them.
Totally. And Christy, I'm really curious, what do you think, like the broader sports industry, right? Like the leagues, athletes, like the multiple brands, like what can they do to help close that gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the leagues have, really started to address this issue. I will say this is something I've seen change significantly over the last 20 years. I don't think 20 years ago the sports industry was as aware of some of the challenges going on in youth sports and in the dichotomy that was taking place. But now it is very much, I think, more centered, parent, and people are aware. So I would say there's a couple of things. I mean, one, being aware, making sure that, from the top down, not just sort of, I would say, the community side of these brands, but from the top down, that it's very much apparent that there's an issue. There's executive buy-in, that it's coming from the top down. It's not just something we're doing over here on the side, on the community side of the business, or, in the philanthropic side of the business, but the companies are really buying into, like, sports are critical, and youth sports is really critical to build the next generation of athletes and consumers. So I think identifying organizations that are doing great work in this space and supporting them through financial and in-kind resources is what these companies should be doing. I think we don't need a bunch of new initiatives. What we need is the initiatives that are out there to really be well supported. And I think if these companies are doing their homework, they're going to identify a bunch of organizations like Good Sports that can really help them do that.
Totally. And Christy, for you personally, what's a project or partnership that happened over the last few years that you are most proud of?
I am proud of a bunch of the partnerships that we have. We have incredible partnerships with Nike and Under Armour and Gatorade, and there's so many great partnerships that we have grown. And I think that's one of the great things is once you get to work with some of these companies, we can grow things from there, which is really incredible. I love working with partners that really view Good Sports not as like a vendor and really as a partner, and will think of us as an expert in this area and really look to us to help lead the initiative and the strategy behind the initiative. So there's incredible partnership, and those are just a couple, but there's many more. I would say one of the things I'm really proud of is two things. During COVID, we saw an incredible, obviously, impact on society. But one of the things that, I'm sure you guys are aware of is that kids got hit really hard. They weren't in school, they didn't have access to their friends, they got pulled out of all their sports, and we saw just incredible impact of that depression and, just anxiety and lots of things that were really tough to watch. And we launched a program very early on called Restore Play, which was our initiative to really get kids back on the field, back on the courts as safely and as quickly as possible. And it was just incredible to see that happen. And I think that was just such an important part of the recovery, is to be able to say, hey, we're a resource as soon as you can get out there. Let's get your kids out there. And we did things like home deliveries of equipment. We did all sorts of, interesting initiatives there. So I'm really proud of the work that we did. And obviously, as we came out of that, to have as many kids still playing sports as possible was really important to us. And the other thing I would say is we have an initiative called She Who Plays, which is our efforts to try to level the playing field between in sort of as it relates to gender equity in youth sports. And so one of our concerns is that we're seeing girls drop out of sports at twice the rate of boys by age 14. And we know a lot of this is happening because it's a really important age for young girls, and there's a lot of changes going on in their bodies, and they are not always feeling as welcome and as comfortable playing sports at that age. And so we've got a bunch of initiatives that we're working on with lots of partners to really invest to make sure that girls have access to everything that they need to feel comfortable. Things as simple as like sports bras and uniforms that fit them, and footwear and the right size basketball. And so we're we're very excited to see all the work that's being done at the professional level and the interest of so many in what's going on in women's professional sports and even in college sports. But we have to make sure that we're investing also in the youth so that we continue to see that kind of momentum.
Yeah, of course. And with these initiatives that you're doing having such broad impacts, how do you go about measuring success from an executive standpoint beyond just the numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for us, our team is supporting, hundreds of organizations every year. And so we are constantly hearing the stories come back to us, like how a child was individually impacted by this, how a team has been able to add a new age group or add a girls program. We hear stories of like, this is the first new uniform that they've ever had and they slept in it. We first brand new pair of sneakers. Even as it relates to some recent things out in LA, we've been trying to support programs out there as so many families lost so much in the fires. So being able to put a pair of
Yeah.
cleats back on a kid so they can get back on the field. So there's hundreds of those stories. And, I think that's the real impact for us, is being able to hear those stories and know that, in addition to these incredible numbers, if you look at it in aggregate, we're also individually impacting families and kids and programs. And sometimes kids just need one person. They just need one person to believe in them, give them the opportunity. When you go out there and you've got the right equipment and you feel good in it, that can change their whole perspective about playing sports. And we know if they get an opportunity to play sports, they've got opportunities to have so much more in life. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish.
No, totally, Christy. And for you personally, I mean, what does it mean to you, right? That if you guys have come this far, that you guys are still, helping out communities, at the turn of, natural disasters and things like that, right? Like you can immediately contribute, you can immediately help, after COVID. So just what does it mean to you? If there was anybody that was thinking about going into nonprofit in sports, how would you encourage them? What questions should they answer for themselves?
Yeah, we had our 20th anniversary last year. And I will say, Melissa and I are not the best at looking back. We're very, very focused on looking forward. And so I feel like the 20th anniversary was a great opportunity for us to actually look back at where we've come from and realize how much progress that we've made and how many people we've impacted.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud. I'm really proud. I will say that, it just takes an army of people to be able to do this work. And, we have an incredible staff, but over the last 20 years, we've had incredible people come through our doors that are obviously moved on to other positions that have helped us move this organization forward. We've had incredible donors and partners. So it doesn't happen alone. I'm very proud of the work that we have done, but it's very much a team effort like sports. And in terms of, I get asked the question a lot about, starting nonprofits. And I don't actually encourage a ton of people to start a nonprofit. There's a lot of great nonprofits that are out there that need good people. So I often tell people that unless you're truly seeing a gap in the market where something that you have an idea that really truly doesn't exist out there, I really recommend people do a lot of research to find if there's other organizations out there that are doing similar work that could really use good people to help support them. That being said, sometimes there are gaps. I mean, there was nobody doing anything like what Good Sports does. And still to this day, really nobody doing it on the national level and the scale that we're doing with brand new equipment. So I think if there is a gap, that is a great opportunity to be an entrepreneur in the space. Social impact is really important. And we need really strong strategic people doing this work to do it well. So if there is a gap, I do encourage people to do it. Just make sure that they have the right skill set to do it, because unfortunately passion is not enough. You really need to be able to have the skills to build a business and to run a business. So just make sure you have a team that can help you do that.
Yeah, so kind of hitting on the skills required to start this business, what did you learn from your time in management consulting that ultimately helped you in the transition?
I loved my time in management consulting. I think I learned so much about business and operations and strategy, about how you approach a strategic problem, how you break it down, how you try to look at all the different pieces of it and then put it back together to figure out how you can do it better or how you can do it differently. So I think it was that process and sort of that way of strategic and analytic thinking that I brought into Good Sports. And I think Melissa would say the same. In terms of like the day-to-day, like you learn all of that on the job. We didn't know. I mean, I had never never worked in a nonprofit before. I had never worked in the sports industry before. So it was really that analytical and strategic thinking that I think that I learned that I was able to bring to the table. And also, I would just say being incredibly curious and inquisitive is incredibly important. So you got to ask a lot of questions, and to this day, I mean, I am faced with things I've never seen before. It's not like even after 20 years, I have all the answers, but having an approach and a way to think about problems has been incredibly important.
Totally. And Christy, kind of going back to working in the nonprofit sector for the sports industry, what are some common misconceptions about doing that?
Sometimes I get asked like, "Oh, do you do this full time?" People I think have this impression of nonprofits that they're not real businesses, and the reality is like there's almost nothing different about a for-profit and a nonprofit from a business building perspective and an operations perspective, other than the tax code and the return on investment is social and not financial.
Right.
So, I mean, you have to be able to do all the things. You got to be able to have good managers. You got to be able to, I mean, we have a 40,000 square foot warehouse with millions of dollars worth of equipment. We've become a logistics company.
Yeah.
We had to learn how to be a logistics company. We have to have human resources. We need to have a finance department. So, we need to know how to budget. We need to know how to manage a board. We need to know how to do business development. So I think the misconception a little bit about nonprofits is that they're sort of like this nice thing to do, and they're, kind of easy to operate and manage. And the reality is they're actually not. So I would say that's probably the biggest one.
Yeah, and as we kind of wind down the podcast, what is next for Good Sports? What do you see as the next big opportunity, next big kind of endeavor that you look to kind of go into?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's anything like huge and like some huge flashy thing. I think that's the other people don't, realize like everything is incremental, right?
Right.
Every partnership that we bring to the table, every donation we make, it's all incremental to getting us to where we need to be. And I would say, driving awareness is probably one of the hardest things as a nonprofit because we just don't have the marketing team that you would have in a for-profit.
Hmm.
And I think, being incredibly creative on that front is something that we've done a pretty good job on, but we really want to do more. And the reality is the more people that know about the work that we do, the more support we're going to get and the more impact we're going to be able to have. So I think you're going to see Good Sports really leaning into ambassadors and getting more athletes involved in a more strategic and consistent way. And not only athletes, but also influencers and really kind of leveraging their audiences to be able to raise the awareness of Good Sports. On the programmatic and impact side, I would say, are continuing to grow and make sure the more resources we have, the more kids that we can serve. We are very focused on our She Who Plays campaign. There's a lot of excitement around women's sports. So I think you're going to see more of that.
Yeah.
And then we are also invested in trying to help restore LA. So I think that is going to be a long-term proposition for us because what we're finding, probably not even just restore play LA, but I think you're going to see us a little bit more vocal in the disaster relief area because as our climate has changed over the last several years, we are seeing more and more natural disasters, and we're being looked to for as a resource. And one of the challenges is that we don't have a fund for that. If we don't have resources set aside for that, it's really hard to plan for something you don't know is coming.
For
and
sure.
So we're looking at how we can do a better job there. But I think you're just going to see us incrementally growing and adding more partners and having more impact in the community, and that's going to be continue to be our focus as we grow as an organization.
Totally, Christy. And how can, listeners who want to support Good Sports or get involved, how can they contribute to the mission?
Yeah, I would, a couple things. I mean, one, obviously, anybody who's interested in making a donation to our organization can find that very easily on our website, which is goodsports.org. I also would say, depending on where you're located, we have emerging leaders councils in New York, Chicago, and Boston. So if you're a young leader and interested in learning more about how you can give back, that's a great way. I would also say, to the extent that you can follow us socially, you're going to really understand some of the work that we're doing, see the impact firsthand, and you'll find as we are going through different campaigns, opportunities to give.
Totally, Christy. And then kind of just backpedaling a little bit here, because I'm really curious and I wanted to ask you this. From some of the other people that we interviewed that kind of work in the nonprofit sector for the sports industry, they said that one of the biggest challenges that keeps them up at night, and it's part of the hardest part of the job, is for them just to say no. Like, there's a lot of people who, may want your help. And you kind of alluded to it, like sometimes you don't have the resources set aside. So how do you go about, like, picking the initiatives that will have the most impact, right, on for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the challenges of nonprofits is we never have enough resources to actually fill the entire need. I think you have to be incredibly clear about your criteria, about what you support, when you support it, how you support it, and being very clear to those that need that support that is sort of how you look at the universe. So for us, very clear, it's, high poverty, high need areas that we support. We are pretty general in that we will support all sports and all geographies. So,
Yeah.
that is great because we can say yes to a lot of people. I think just being really clear and transparent on that, and then making sure people know that we are a nonprofit, that we do have limited resources, that we might not be able to support you today, but we may be able to support you in the future. That is one of the hard parts of running a nonprofit for sure.
Totally, totally. And Christy, as we're coming to the end of the show, if you could snap your fingers or have a magic wand and solve one major issue in youth sports today, which one would it be and why?
I would go back to a time where we had a lot of local accessible rec youth programming available for kids that was available to them at low cost. I would kind of again try to put that back in the bottle and tell kids it's okay to play multiple sports. They don't need to specialize at 8, 9, or 10 years old, and really put the focus on that instead of what we've done, unfortunately, which is having kids focus too early and be really focused on one sport and pushing them towards very expensive options.
No, that's a great point, Christy. And so here we're last question, I promise.
Sure. Yeah.
We're here at A&M, so a tradition that we have is we send good bull out to people. So
Okay.
that's kind of like saying like good luck or a shout out essentially. So is there anyone you would like to send good bull to?
I would like to send them to you guys. I think it's great what you're doing. I think that it's really awesome that you guys are using an opportunity for a school project to shed light on something that's, really important. And I appreciate you guys, thinking of us to be able to share this information.
No, Christy, we really appreciate it, seriously. And you know, I think what you guys are doing is super awesome. And like you said, it's gradual, but exponentially has such a big impact. So thank you guys.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Christy Keswick, thank you for joining the show.
Thank you.